Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Hey there, and welcome to you. November 15. Blue sky, sun, beautiful fall day. I want to share with you some of what transpired in your government in Washington, D.C. yesterday, just to get much of what I'm about to say you already know of, but just to sort of get a generalized picture of probably a 10-hour period in the nation's capital, and specifically in the seat of government. Maybe I'm going to drop back because I haven't talked yet about the Democrats in the House saving the new Speaker of the House, the Republican Speaker of the House, from his own party, and getting a temporary funding measure passed, because Democrats are still adults. They are a functional, mostly, political party that comports itself with a degree of seriousness, as one would expect. And I was taken, actually, by the state, because, there's a part of me that says, let them hang themselves. Why step in and help them? Well, because this is what adults do when things are this dire, and something must be done to fund the government. And the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, who I find very impressive, he said this: from the very beginning of this Congress, we have made clear, the Democrats, that we will always put people over politics and try to find common ground with our Republican colleagues whenever possible. And that is why they saved Johnson, what the hell's his name, that creep, the speakers behind Johnson. And Jeffries went on to say, we did that because a government shutdown would harm our economy, our national security, and it would harm us in ways that we cannot even know, and we don't want to know. So this is more kicking the can down the road, because that's what will have to be until the voters of this country wake up and stop putting people in charge of our government who don't believe in our government, and whose only reason for being is to subvert our government. So, what ends up happening, now I'm going to go back to just yesterday. So I guess the fact that the crazed right-wing the Gates wing of the Republican Party did not immediately start calling for the head of the Speaker of the House for allowing Democrats, for talking to them, I guess, for talking to them and using them to help pass his bill, which is, of course, what got former Speaker Kevin McCarthy ousted. So McCarthy apparently was in a particularly foul mood yesterday, given that this guy, Johnson, had done exactly what he had done, but thus far seems to not be treated with the animus that came at him. And so we then are treated to this spectacle of McCarthy walking through Capitol Hill hallway and sucker punching another Republican member of Congress who had voted to oust him. And then you have that guy running after McCarthy. How the hell, I mean, looking for a fight, lunging at each other. These are Republicans in government. And then you had that extraordinary display in the Senate, the Republicans. This was a meeting of the, who ever heard of it, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. And a Republican senator with the bizarre name of Mark Wayne, that's all one word, Mark Wayne Mullen, the great state of Oklahoma. Mark Wayne Mullen literally got out of his chair, started taking off his wedding ring, I think that looked like what he was doing, because he was about to engage in a physical fight with the person who was the witness at the hearing. He was fully intending there was going to be a fist fight right there in the hearing, stopped only by the old man, Senator Bernie Sanders, who happened to be sitting right next to him, who yelled at him, "Sit down! You're a United States Senator." Now, that did get the guy to sit down, amazingly. But what we see here is a party made up of, well, you fill in the blanks. I feel like my words are, I tend to use the same ones over and over again. And, you know, these people are not serious. I've heard them, you know, people we say that, you know, a group of 4-year-olds would behave better. And then you feel like you're slandering 4-year-olds by saying that, or, you know, it's a clown car, but then you're slandering clowns. It's hard to imagine the damage that today's Republicans are doing to our government. In real time, you can see these instances, but over time, the accumulation of this kind of buffoonery makes our country look buffoonish. This is what Republicans are doing to the United States of America. But here's what I want to point out. While the Republicans were engaging in sucker punches, attempted fisticuffs, all manner of. Oh, you've got Marjorie Taylor Greene running around, actually calling her fellow Congresswoman Boebert a whore. These people are beyond belief. I mean, they make really middle school students look mature. Meanwhile, at that same time, turns out that the inflation rate, which was released for the month of October, was zero. Zero. A direct result of Biden, a Democrat's handling of the economy. The inflation rate dropping to zero. And that zero means that the yearly inflation rate has dropped to 3.2%, which is astonishing. And so, under the Biden administration, we see a recovery that is generally unacknowledged. And in fact, when Americans are asked about Democrats' handling of the economy, they say it's an outrage and it'd be better off in the hands of the Republicans. Will somebody explain that to me? Also, under the Biden administration yesterday, the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is supposed to keep an eye on business in America, announced it had filed 784 enforcement actions against businesses in this country and had pulled in $5 billion in penalties for businesses operating outside the law. Because Democrats believe in regulation of business. Also, and I don't think that this got covered, the Biden White House yesterday announced a new initiative on women's health research, because research into women's health hasn't happened much, because men have been the researchers and men are interested in men and women are secondary. And so the fact is that women who suffer from a number of debilitating conditions, which have never had the kind of research that if men suffered from them, they would have, are now going to be targeted, such as endometriosis and fibroids. Women are forever being maltreated by medicine, because the only thing doctors know is how a male body responds. They know little about women's bodies. And then a whole bunch of other things that the White House did yesterday. You see none of that on the news. You see the Republicans acting like children, which doesn't, I imagine, help them. But you don't see the news bothering to tell Americans that there is some parts of government functioning, and those are the parts that are under the control of the Democratic Party. The White House yesterday announced more than $6 billion in investments to strengthen the electric grid, specifically in underserved communities that are bearing the brunt of weather events. Little things like that. It's called governing. It's called abiding by the oath that you took. It's serving the people and not losing sight of their plight, their needs, even if they're not greasing your palms with money. I just wanted to note that media continues to fall short in so many ways because it's chasing clicks and it's chasing eyeballs, and it is a business and it is not considered a public service. And that is not helping us one whit. Speaking of media, let me, for those of you who say that, well, I can't listen to this, that, I'll listen to the BBC. The BBC is showing its true colors these days. And the kind of sloppy, biased reporting it has been doing on the war in Gaza and Israel is just mind-blowing. And I have a, for instance, during their news last night, the anchor was covering the fact that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, had entered the main hospital in Gaza. That was breaking news last night as they went into what they say is housing underground, pretty much the operations of the terrorist organization that governs or fails to govern Gaza. And here's what the BBC said. Let me get the exact. I'll be able to get the exact, damn it. It said, the anchor said, said that the Israelis were targeting medical teams and Arab speakers. Okay, so anyone watching the BBC was told that the Israelis were in the hospital and they were targeting the doctors and nurses and Arab speakers, which would be everybody, I guess. The fact that the BBC felt it necessary to correct that statement by their anchor later does not mean that a lot of people walked away with, thinking that, well, sure, what would you expect, those bloodthirsty Israelis? Of course they went in. I'm surprised they weren't taking babies out of incubators, right? The fact is, the BBC was using a report that Reuters had sent. And the Reuters report had said that the Israeli forces included medical teams and Arabic speakers. In other words, the real news was that as the Israeli army went in, they went in with medical teams, medical equipment for the hospital, and Arab speakers so that they could easily communicate with people that they needed to communicate with. The BBC reported that the Israelis went in and targeted medical teams and Arab speakers. The BBC comes out later and says, "We apologize for this error, which fell below our usual editorial standards." Because, as is so often the case, all that did was reinforce the story that the BBC has generally been putting out in their reporting about the barbarity, not of Hamas, but of the Israelis. And one can see how a mistake like that can happen if you have an extraordinarily biased news staff, producers, writers. The fact is that nobody before that aired said, "Wait, what?" Doesn't even make sense. Targeting Arab speakers? What does that even mean? It didn't even pass the smell test. And yet off it went because it buttressed the narrative of the Israelis being the bad guys. I want to also note this. Another media outlet, Al Jazeera, as you know, is an Arab outlet. They were doing a live show. I'm looking at the screenshot, live show, so all the banners at the bottom are in Arabic. I can't read what they're saying. But they're in a hospital, and they're interviewing an old man who had been hurt. And the reporter is asking the man how he got hurt. This is live on Al Jazeera. And the old man said this. This is the translation. "Why is Hamas hiding among us? Why don't they go to hell and hide there instead?" That aired, but that interview was quickly stopped and the reporter went on. The injured old guy knew how he'd been hurt and why he was now suffering. He did not blame the Israelis. He blamed Hamas. And if people really wanted to help the Palestinians, they would be marching against Hamas. Because as the old man said, why are they hiding among us civilians? Why don't they go to hell and hide there instead? Okay, just because I don't, I'm going to immediately shift gears, although I'm returning back to this. It's too big and I can't let it go. But will somebody explain? I need your help here. Explain this to me. I'm seeing reports now because I don't get the local newspaper anymore. I'm seeing reports of that horrific death of the hockey player in England, a guy who had played for a bit with the Pittsburgh Penguins, who during a game, hockey game in England, his throat was slashed by the skate, right, of the person on the other team. And he died, cut his throat. And I see more than one instance of, sort of, this is a little news item, but it leaves me really confused because it says, get it? This is from WESA. It says police in South Yorkshire, England, say they have made an arrest in connection with the death of Adam Johnson, a professional hockey player who died last month after his neck was slashed by the blade of a skate during a game. The man, who authorities have not named, was charged with suspicion of manslaughter and is in police custody. Now, what do you mean police haven't named him? I saw his name weeks ago. I mean, they know whose skate it was. The police have not named him. I mean, will somebody help me here? I'm serious. There can't be anybody but the player on the other team who was identified earlier. So they've arrested the other player for manslaughter in this death. And we all know that name, even though I don't have it in front of me here. Why would that be the way the reporting is, unless I'm totally confused about this? I mean, that is the oddest thing I've ever seen. There's video. I mean, not that I wanted to look at it, but there's video of the game and what looked like the collision or whatever. And there was a sense by some when it happened that the guy, who I guess is now been charged, did it knowingly, that it wasn't just some accidental thing, that he, I guess, appears to knowingly take his skate and slice it across the poor guy's throat. Have no idea. All I know is I just am increasingly confused by so much that I read or see. And it makes no sense to me. So just asking, if anybody else knows anything more about that, will you please enlighten me, because I'm mixed up. Hillary Clinton wrote an interesting piece in I think The Atlantic. That's where I read it today. And in it, she addresses those who are calling for an immediate ceasefire and says that it's not a good idea, because she said ceasefires freeze conflicts. Ceasefires do not resolve conflicts. They freeze them. And if you have a ceasefire at the wrong moment and freeze a situation, that will only benefit one side, and in this case, that would be Hamas, that it is not wise. And she went on to talk about something that she knew about. I believe this is when her husband was in the White House. And you'll recall Slobodan Milosevic, another wonderful human. He was the dictator in Serbia. And there was an ugly, nasty war going on there, Serbia, Kosovo. And the United States came in on the side of Kosovo. And who called for a ceasefire there? Slobodan Milosevic. He wanted the ceasefire. And Hillary says, I mean, that was obviously just a cynical attempt to preserve the status quo at the time, which was Serbia controlling Kosovo. And so we said, no ceasefire now. It is the same as Putin and his allies calling for it is, a ceasefire in Ukraine now, because that only benefits Russia. A ceasefire now in Ukraine would leave big chunks of Ukraine under Russian control. And then Putin could start things up when things were more advantageous to him, having had time to regroup and replan. Ceasefires are not always the right thing at any given moment. Just saying. God. Oh, also, before I forget, I'm thinking that a lot of you have not sent your emails because I just know I don't have a lot of your emails. And I'm not the type that has, squirreled things away and could go back. So I do need your emails, because it could well be that in another month or so, I may be coming at you from a different place. So I need to be able to get in touch. Okay. And I do want to say that there are, some opportunities perhaps that I am looking into. It's all up in the air at the moment, but that's that. So words, as you know, are important to me. And I know there's certain words I overuse. Usually the words that we ourselves overuse, we're not that aware of it. It's only listeners who hear it. And I'm sure you guys could make a nice list of, she said it again. But I am aware that there are, go-to words. But sometimes when words are overused and or misapplied, there are consequences. And I have always felt that once a word gets overused, illiberally used, just, throwing it around for any reason, especially a word that is meant to, connote something unusual or huge or out of the ordinary. As soon as it starts just being used as if it were somehow an everyday thing, it loses its meaning. I argued for years, decades, decades, that the word hero is overused. And consequently, it diminishes the meaning. If everybody is a hero, you see, this is, I know there's a banner over, what street is that? Center Avenue. There's a banner at the Hillman Cancer Center. And I think it says, heroes work here. Now, I understand where that's coming from, but it's part of the devaluation of a word that should be sparsely used simply because most people are not heroic, I would argue. Anybody who wears a uniform is not a hero. And even that thank you for your service crap is it's nonsensical. There are many people who have put on the uniform of the military and served us well and did themselves proud. And I do thank them. Yeah, I do. But just because somebody's wearing a uniform doesn't mean you don't know them. You don't know what they did. You don't know if they served honorably. And it's like virtue signaling again. It's just this. Why do we engage in so much crapola? These things that we're supposed to say. My God, going to that football game, there's so much of that. Thank you for our heroes. Oh, the heroes. My God, there were more heroes at that stadium than you could shake a stick at. The word is meaningless now. It's sort of like what we did with, everybody gets a trophy, everybody gets a star, everybody gets nothing has any power then, any meaning. The word that's really stuck in my craw now, though, and I have addressed it before, but I'm going to address it again, is the one being tossed about by the supposedly pro-Palestinian marchers all over the world. And as I have said, it really is hard to be pro-Palestinian and pro-Hamas, because Hamas has blood on its hands in regard to the horror that the Gazans are experiencing. There is no doubt of that. If Hamas had not engaged in that, words fail me, in that gleeful slaughter of civilians, children, parents, concert goers, gleeful. And in fact, one of them calling his parents and saying, I'm a hero, right? There it is, all comes together. I'm a hero. If they had not done that, there would be no Israeli soldiers in the hospital in Gaza right now. There would be no Gazans uprooted from the north and fleeing south. There would be none of those injured and dead Gazans. It was Hamas who knowingly, cynically wanted this. Knowing that the world would be behind it, because the world is in agreement on one thing. They hate the Jews. So in that regard, it's brilliant. But the word that just makes my blood boil, Congresswoman Tlaib used it. She accused Joe Biden of funding genocide. The word genocide has become one of those words that is now meaningless, rendered meaningless by its use in situations to which it does not, its true meaning tells you it does not apply. There is no genocide of Palestinians. For God's sake, the population of Palestinians has tripled in the time that Israel has been a nation state. If the Israelis were bent on genocide of Palestinians, they're sure doing it incorrectly, because there's more of them than there's ever been. That's a terrible genocide. There is no genocide. I have said there is a war, an ugly war. Every time somebody gets killed in a war, it is not a genocide. And all the folks who say that there is apparently don't give a damn about the real genocides that are going on right now. They're not in the streets because the poor Uyghurs in China are being eradicated. They are not in the streets because in Myanmar, the Rohingya are being hunted down and wiped out. Those are real genocides happening right now. These good folk are not in the streets. They're not in the streets about what's going on in Sudan. Do you guys pay any attention? I mean, there's this year alone, some 180,000 civilians have run for their lives in another African country, Chad. And let me tell you, a lot of what's going on there in Africa is bankrolled by Russia. So I just want to say, if anybody around me calls what's going on there a genocide, they are either ignorant, they're so besotted with hate of Israel and / Jews that they can't think straight, or they just want to be in the in crowd. They want to stand with the loudest voices. It's empowering. You can get off on it. I know, I've been in many marches myself. The feeling is wondrous. The feeling of community. Just saying. Did I hear I had a call? I'm sorry. I was screaming so much I couldn't hear.
Hi, Lynn. It's Beth.
Hi.
Hi. Sorry to get you off. what you were saying is, I mean, I agree with everything you were just saying there. That, you know, somebody brought up the comment of, did any of these college campuses give a shit about the Palestinians on October 1st?
Not much.
No, you didn't have the same thing. And the true genocides that are happening in this world, because it's not blasted on TikTok or being weaponized in a new way by hostile powers, you know, that's, I think, why you're seeing a lot of this.
I think there's that unifying. I think the big unifier here is, and I again, you know, coming from me, I guess it's suspect, but I think Jews are feeling like, wow, here we go again. Just Jew hate. It's a go-to. Yeah. It's a go-to. You want to get people in the street? Yeah, it works.
No, yeah, you're going back to the oldest playbook in the world, unfortunately.
You know, I saw this, you know, disquieting quote from, what's her name? Deborah Lipstadt, who is, she actually is, did you know there is a United States envoy to combat anti-Semitism? There's actually someone now in the State Department that's their job. And it is she. And she was asked what she thinks about what's happening. And she said, this is a woman who studied anti-Semitism all her life. She said, something about this is different from anything I have ever seen. And she's seen something that is frightening.
Well,
just saying.
Just to see, I mean, first of all, the ads you've now seen on television, just bringing up to everyone what's happening with anti-Semitism. The fact that you have to advertise this and people not just supporting and saying, hey, this is wrong. These people were brutalized. That now you have to have advertisements about the rise of anti-Semitism. It's like this whole campaign that I just find so troubling that it's needed.
Yeah.
More so than anything.
Yeah.
And that what you were bringing up in Chad too, you know, you have to look at our State Department. When you look at what Rex Tillerson did and gutting our State Department and getting rid of people, you know what, who knew those minute villages in Chad, had boots on the ground connections. So you always kind of knew it was happening to prevent things just like this. To know, hey, the Chinese are in here and we don't know what they're doing, or the Russians, or whoever it may be.
And you know who moved in? The Russians. And you know who specifically? Remember Prigozhin?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where they were picking up a lot of their fighters for the initial war in Ukraine.
That's right. And that's where they were already on the ground causing trouble in a lot of African states. But our media does not cover that at all. At all.
No, and
not that Americans would care. Our media only gives people what they want to hear, I guess.
Well, no, people care because you know what? We have the 5-second attention span. Yeah. And when they blast it and they get all riled up, and then let's move on to topic B. You know, we don't ever care if there was a resolve of this. We just got all riled up, and here we go. I did not get a chance to read the Hillary Clinton piece in The Atlantic. Don't judge me, but I watched her on The View. And I'm going to say, first of all, her entire presentation gave me chills because I thought, first of all, oh my God, you should have been president of the United States.
Yeah, you know how smart she is, how much she knows. Yeah.
Oh God, but two, she put this whole Hamas, you know, that people are equating Hamas and Palestinians as the same, and, you know, shame on Israel. The way she verbalized it, Lynn, was so concise, and I thought, you know what? You got to get this clip and put this out there like crazy. And yes, there are a ton of people that hate Hillary. But, you know, for those other people, you need to listen. She was in this position. She was Secretary of State, saying, you know, not just the standard line of you can't, you know, negotiate with terrorists, which is true. But the way she said is, hey, we've tried this before. Do not come in good faith. They are not a nation state. They are not like Jordan or Egypt and all these countries that came before and said, you know what? We realize there's a beneficial thing here if we make peace in Israel because it makes our country stronger.
That is correct. And you know what? I mean, Hamas? You think Jordan doesn't want Israel to destroy Hamas? You bet they do. You think Egypt doesn't want? Are you kidding? Yeah. Hamas, and yet they're the heroes to like the left. The college campuses. I thought, these are the best and brightest, right? Supposedly, right? God help us. God help us. And actually, Lipstadt said something else wonderful. She says, you can be a PhD and an SOB at the same time.
That's a good line.
Yeah. Education, those letters after your name, does not say that you are a good person.
Right. Well, thank you for letting me chat with you about this, and just hopefully some of these things tone down. But I just seeing what you're seeing, and again, seeing what you're seeing on college campuses, which you kind of think, okay, you're the generation I have hope for. You were the generation of, acceptance of everything, black, white, gay, straight, Jewish, Muslim. But yeah, it's
not
that they've been manipulated this quickly.
Yeah. God help us, huh?
Yes.
You're right. I mean, you're right. These are the ones that, we were saying these young people, they're not filled with hate. Like, they're different. No, they're not. They're not. Damn it.
I know.
Okay. Thanks, you.
Lynn. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Yeah. You see, the thing is, what the young people on college campuses, they've been indoctrinated in seeing the world in a certain way. And in this template that they now see the world in, you are put in a group. They're big on groups. And so they see, in their worldview, they see Israelis and Jews as whites. That's not good. And they see the Palestinians as people of color. Now, right there, I'm laughing, because Palestinians and Israelis and Jews are all from the same family tree. Read the Bible. We're all from the same family tree. So that some of us are all of a sudden white and others of us are all of a sudden people of color. Huh? But if you are able to start putting people in these boxes, and one is oppressed and one is an oppressor, and then Hamas becomes a liberator of the oppressed. And here again is the stupidity, and I've mentioned this. 30% of Israelis, 1/3 of them, are descendants of what we would call white Europeans, Ashkenazi Jews. I'm an Ashkenazi Jew. 30%. The rest of Israel would definitely be people of color. But don't tell the students that. It'll hurt their heads. The others are from Northern Africa, Iraq, Libya. They are called Mizrahi Jews. And there are more of them than the white European Ashkenazi Jews, the remnants of European Jewry who were not killed by Hitler and his cohorts. And there's a ton of black Jews, Ethiopian Jews. If you look at the Israeli Defense Force, there are a lot of brown people in it. There are a lot of black people in it. And as I said yesterday, there are a lot of Arabs in it. But no, that complicates things. Complicates things. And I don't know how you can get through to people who are so sure of themselves, as young people are invariably. You just gotta hope, I guess, that they eventually wake up and that they regret, because they are helping unleash a wave of Jew hate that no Jew who's alive now, except the oldest who somehow survived the Holocaust, have ever seen. Words, genocide. There is no genocide there. Apartheid. I do not think there's apartheid there. There is, in Israel, definite room for improvement, much as there is in the United States, in regard to how they treat those who are in more marginalized groups. But apartheid, the Palestinians who live in Israel, as I said and have said, they are citizens. They vote. They serve on the Supreme Court. They serve in the parliament, the Knesset. They own big businesses. They are hugely represented in Israel's colleges and universities. That doesn't look like apartheid. It doesn't look like South Africa. But words get... And another thing that the students think is that Israel dispossessed these Palestinians. They took their land, right? Well, that is an argument we could go forever about. You know, if you've ever been to Israel, which I have, if you've been to Jerusalem, you see, you know, that extraordinary mosque above the Wailing Wall. And the reason it's above the Wailing Wall is the Wailing Wall is part of the Jews' temple that was there long before the Muslims came. Just by virtue of who's on top. The mosque on top shows that they built their land on top of the Jewish land that was already there. Just saying. But never mind. Let's go to 1948. Let's say, okay, so Israel then displaced all those Palestinians. Now, if the students in the streets really think that every country that exists because it displaced the people that were there should give it back and get the hell out, then I'd like to know if those students, those Americans, are willing to leave the United States and give it to the remnants of the indigenous people, the natives that were here. Australia, the same. The nonsensicalness of this. All right, guys, send me those emails. I'm serious. It's a Lynn Cullen show at gmail.com. Lynn Cullen show at gmail.com. I wish there was something happier to talk about. You have a good day, okay? Bye-bye.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.